No problem.
You Oh, your camera is not on the screen. What's up, everybody? How's it going?
Hey!
Hey, everybody. There I am.
Hey!
Right on. There we go. Okay.
Cool.
Didn't quite fix the camera stuff in advance. That's okay. Everyone, welcome to the show. Another
All right.
episode of the Kessel Chat. This is awesome. Thank you all so much for being here in the audience out there in YouTube land. And you can see we have a special guest. We have another special guest. It's awesome. Wherever we point,
that's right.
I can't tell where we point.
So stoked to be here.
Exactly, dude. Before we get to intros for you, Brandon, because I totally want to dive into that in a sec. I just want to say thanks to everybody who's out there. Really appreciate you watching the show and just being supporters of ours. Let's see if this works. I did something kind of cool earlier. It works. Sweet. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, look at that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do that. Just click the little buttons on the channel and the thumbs ups and the notifications and all that jazz. Shameless plug, but we really appreciate everyone joining and being here with us. So, without further ado, we come back to our main here. Awesome. Brandon, it is so good to have you on the show, man. Do you want to do a quick intro for everybody?
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. I'm Brandon. I on Instagram, I'm brandon.aka.jarjar. I usually just mostly lately I've been posting about like all of the Star Wars novels I've been reading. I've used to be a teacher. I used to be a literature teacher, and I just love talking about books. Now I'm a small business owner. I own a hair salon here in Las Vegas. And I just love Star Wars so much. So I'm like so excited to be here, like talking about my favorite thing in the world with these awesome people. So I don't know, just thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really excited. Always wanted to do something like this.
Oh, dude, awesome. It's
Right on.
just fantastic to have you here. Like, Ryan and I have been doing the show now it's been a few months, and it's basically the highlight of the week. We also know that like Fridays are sort of like no meeting days at work, so like Thursday is always like crammed with stuff. So the end of today is like, oh, let's just geek out for a while, and then we won't have to worry about so much what happens later,
such a cool way to end the week.
right?
Oh no,
Exactly.
totally. It's like it's a nice gateway into our no meeting Friday, but it's like just Jeff talked about this too, and Brandon, we're so glad to have you here because one of the best parts about the Kessel chat is that it is like us just having an open discussion. And it's funny because I remember Jeff when I first came onto the show, one of the things that we found was this is like a fun thing to share. And it's also great to share with other people that like are in this world that are really connected to it. A joke that that we have and we've talked about on previous episodes is that often the people that are around us are subject to our discussions. So many times my wife has had to hear, I mean, why did they call it Naboo? Why didn't they just call it Alderaan? So it is one of these things that it's great to have another fan in the mix to be able to talk about all these things that we all care so much about. So really happy to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like I used to like tell my students, it's like one of my favorite things about stories is the ability to share them and discuss them with other people. Like there's such a cool way to connect with people. And I cannot say enough how much everyone in my life has to hear about whatever Star Wars book or Star Wars show I'm reading, like whether they care about it or not. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I have to get this out somewhere. So you're hearing about
You are 100% in good company there. I think each time we do the show, like especially when my wife could tell you, especially when I get the call like on a Wednesday from my comic book store saying, "Hey, your pull list is we got these 3 books." I'm like, "Oh, Shanna, look what I just got! I got this one and the bounty." She's like, "Oh my god, stop talking about this." She's like, "I just want to watch RuPaul's Drag Race and I don't want to talk about Star Wars."
That said, though, I mean, and Jeff, you gotta say this too. It's like one of the cool parts about this is that it's always easy for people to find me gifts. And I feel like we could have a whole episode on Star Wars related gifts that we have probably all received over the years. And in fact, one of them was these pictures actually here that my wife got. This is exactly the kind of thing that it's like. I'm sure it is one of those things that everybody has to hear about us talking about Star Wars all the time. But man, does it make birthdays, holidays a lot easier to be able to say, you know what that guy likes? He likes Star Wars. So yeah, it makes it a lot my wife, she saw these on eBay. So these were pictures from theaters of Star Wars, but when it came out in the 70s, and someone was selling them off, and she was like, I think Ryan's gonna like this. So cool. It all works out.
My birthday was last week, and my parents were in town.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. We were in town like the weekend
birthday.
before. Thank you. And my mom gave me a gift, like a card or something. She goes, "Oh, your other gift is going to be here soon," and it was gave me a printout. She bought me a Ruggable, and it's a. I don't know if you guys know what a Ruggable is, but
I've had my eyes on one of those for a while.
Yep. So it's a Star Wars. My wife sent her like a couple different options to pick from, and so the one she got me, it's a runner, so it's like 8 feet long, 3.5 feet wide,
wow.
and on it is the Millennium Falcon, followed by a Y-wing and 2 A-wings flying like in formation. So we have it now laying in the entryway. So as you walk in the front door, that's what you see leaving out into and kind of in the back room. And as soon as I got that, I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. And I'd seen the ads for Ruggables, but I didn't know what it was until we got it. Like, oh, like the mat lays on the ground. This just attaches to the top of it, and you can wash it, which is good because my dog has peed on it like 3 times already. But it's awesome. It is made so well. But yeah, you're right, Ryan. It's like I actually went onto Amazon and made a list of like Jeff gift list, and it's basically just Star Wars stuff. And I'm like, if you want to buy me anything ever, just go there and pick something. I will be very happy with anything you pick off that list.
Yeah, if it has a Star Wars logo on it, you're pretty safe to buy it for me. That's how.
Right here. Like I mean, this was a gift. Someone was somewhere, saw this cup, and was like, "Hey, it's got Star Wars on it. I'm sure Ryan's gonna like that." And I
exactly.
so it all works out. Hey, so we have a really cool topic today. Especially because we have a guest who cares a lot about Star Wars and loves Star Wars as much as Jeff and I do. We're going to be talking today about our favorite Star Wars movies, and we have talked about this kind of in the past. We've talked around
It's
this last week. We talked about what our ideal order of watching the movies was, and I think that kind of spilled over into not just our preferred order of watching the movies, but then also like what were our favorites, what were our Jeff, you're talking about ride or die, what were the ones that meant the most to us. And maybe it's because it meant the most to us from an artistic standpoint. Maybe it meant the most to us from a story standpoint. We were talking in the green room before the show about maybe they have a special connection, a time in our lives. So it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of hear all of our stories around what are our favorites. Something that's missing from the title up above us is we're also going to talk about the ones that maybe need some improvement. Maybe the ones that stick out for us as, on the other end of the spectrum, this is maybe not the best. And maybe some ideas on how those could have been addressed. And so, Brandon, you being our guest here, I feel like it's the most appropriate for you to kind of kick us off. What was the Star Wars movie that? Yeah, well, hey, we're happy to have you on, and eager to hear your thoughts on your favorite movie.
So we're going with favorites first, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we could flip it. We could go with the one. I feel like though it's kind of like going to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, you have a really great meal, you might tell one or two people. But if you have a bad meal, you'll tell 100 people.
Okay.
And this is definitely like one of those things where I always feel like it's the easiest, Attack of the Clones, to start out with the things that are maybe the problem children of of the trilogy.
I can do that. So I'm just going to say my number one needs improvement is The Rise of Skywalker, episode 9.
Oh yeah.
And I can't say I hate it or anything. I really genuinely, I can throw on anything and really enjoy watching it. I think it has a lot of fun moments and some really cool action set pieces. But it just has this weird jumbled feeling about it that there were just too many cooks in the kitchen. They wanted to try to do so much in 2 hours, and they did 5 different storylines kind of okay instead of just focusing on something and doing it great. The Palpatine reveal could have been cool if it was built up to. The end, the whatever you want to call it, between Rey and Ben, I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think they needed to kiss. I think it was unnecessary. I know my wife loves that scene so much, but I don't even think it was supposed to be romantic, but there's just so many ways to show a connection without it kind of seeming romantic. You'd think they would have maybe learned the lesson with the Luke and Leia kiss. Maybe they would have taken a hint from that and said, let's just, there's so many weird semantics there, and it just eats away at me. So that's probably my biggest need improvement.
No, we've talked about this in previous episodes. I know, Jeff, you've got some feelings about episode 9. We've talked, even Brandon, about why not divide? You want to cover a lot. And granted, The Last Jedi does not leave you a lot of options. In fact, you could almost end... You could say that there's a feasible ending at the end of The Last Jedi and say, maybe that story kind of ends there. But why not just split episode 9? And there's no reason it's got to be a trilogy. It could have been episode 9 and 10. You can try to establish all those things, or reestablish a new villain, or even show complexity of relationships. But yeah, they were. I know that this phrase has been used before, but they were, what is it, hyperspace skipping through the plot. It was we're here now, and then we're here, and we're doing all this Legend of Zelda side quests. We've got to go to this planet and then to this planet. So yeah, it's just a lot that I know that it struggled. They struggled with that one.
Yeah,
they struggled there.
They did.
That hyperspace skipping thing you just said, Ryan. It what you make me think of is, so like Rogue One did that really well, where they did the side wipes. I mean, some of the other Star Wars movies did the wipe in the film to cut to another part of the plot line that was advancing. Rogue One was a really good example of where that worked really well, where that physical device of like moving the film over to the next scene really did work,
Yeah.
and the next scene actually advanced the story a little bit. But I'm with you, like Rise of Skywalker, the hyperscape space skipping, like as an example, but the story in general just felt like every time they dropped into a new thing, it was like, oh, and we're starting another story now. Like almost like we're watching the pilot of a new TV show where we need to see all the main characters starting off, and hopefully we can get everyone in there,
Yeah,
and hopefully we
that's
can get
what
them
it
buy
felt
in.
like.
Yeah,
Like they even kind of near the in the first act of the film, they just throw you into like, oh yeah, by the way, here's this planet where Poe is actually a criminal, and here's Zori Bliss, who, oh, by the way, they have a history, and it's like, geez, like why do I care about this stuff? Like I it was cool, but like it's not that there weren't cool things, but they could have every little one bit that they just threw at me. I'm like, wow, this could have been so cool if there was build up to it. Certain things like Empire, and even just the original Star Wars. It's like something that they did really well is it was like a slow burn at the beginning, and you like they kind of seeded you into the world and you felt it out. And then I just felt like Rise of Skywalker, like the hyperscape, it's just like from one thing to the next. You're like, okay, well, we explained that for 30 seconds. Let's jump to something else so you're not bored.
yeah.
And it's like, I would have loved to have any of those one elements of the film expanded on and just cut something else out.
Yeah, you just said you made the comment about world building, and Ryan, I've talked about this a couple of times. I was watching a masterclass from Neil Gaiman, and he talked a lot about like if you're a young writer, how you learn how to do world building if you're writing fiction, because you have to set that up first to give. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you do have to give the audience something. And I think for me, one of the things that was really missed in the building of that storyline for Rise of Skywalker, excuse me, is that they almost made the assumption that everyone watching this has already watched The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And I think that was a big problem, because there are going to be people who watch these movies who haven't seen the other movies, like my parents or other people who just don't normally watch Star Wars, like, oh, maybe I'll go with a group and we'll go see this. And if they walk into it, and if you're completely reliant on, you have had to see those other two movies for this to make any sense, people are going to watch it and go, what? And even for us who know the story, we watch it and it was hard to follow. For those folks, they're like, I don't know what this is. This means nothing to me because you gave me no information to go on when I jumped in. I think that was a big miss. It really was.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I think they wanted to like, and I mean, I understand, like they again, like they had a lot of like really, they had a lot of new knots that they had to untie. Like Ryan Johnson wasn't doing J.J. Abrams any favors, even though I'm a really big fan of The Last Jedi.
I am too.
It was not what I expected, and I think that that's kind of one of the reasons why I liked it so much. I remember going into that movie thinking that, oh, I had some ideas around, what this was going to be or what that was going to be. And kind of hearing also too Ryan Johnson talk about some of the aspects of The Last Jedi and why, for example, he wanted to make Rey's parents nobody, was because that was the last thing she would have wanted to hear. Whereas Luke finding out that Vader is his father is the last thing he would have wanted to hear. So it's like, pulling the rug out from your hero in their moment of vulnerability. Whereas, so it's like, I get like a lot of the reasons why Ryan Johnson did what he did. And some of those choices upset people, but they were choices. They were good choices. I think that that was the problem with The Rise of Skywalker, is that it was kind of like what we've all been saying. The choice that they made was, we have to have an episode 9. And that was like the last choice that they made. Then everything else was just like, let's get in as much movie as we can. Like of all 9 of the movies, Rise of Skywalker is the most movie. It's the biggest movie. If you want to
excellently worded. Yes.
Yeah.
It answers the question, how many Snokes can you fit into a container? That many.
No, exactly.
I totally agree with
quantity almost. But I totally agree. I feel like I remember being in the theater, and a theater experience I feel like can kind of, because there's so much going on, it can kind of like really, help to wash away some of the problems that you're having. Like, I remember that was even my experience in episode 1, and it wasn't until I was halfway through the movie in the theater that I was like, uh-oh, I don't know if this is going well. But in Rise of Skywalker, I remember, okay, cool, like, it's kind of like being in a comedy club where everybody else is laughing and you're like, I guess this is funny. And it almost like a laugh track, like it's like, okay, I guess this is, yeah, it's going pretty well. But then I feel like it was right around that whole Chewbacca sequence where they're like, oh no, we've lost Chewbacca. And I remember thinking, like, what, where is this going now? And it was like this movie that almost had amnesia. Like every 15 minutes they were like, this is a brand new movie now. What just happened didn't happen. And we'll just jump on and move forward. So yeah.
And
yeah.
With The Last Jedi, like you said, they make choices, absolutely. And some people don't agree with them, but they were choices and he stuck with them. But like the Chewbacca thing, I mean, I think it takes less than 10 minutes before we know he's okay.
Yeah.
They wanted to just somehow please everybody. And in doing that, they pleased a few people. But, the sequence was cool while it was happening. I was like, oh, well, at least they're doing something. And then 10 minutes later, I was like, never mind. No, they're not. They're just
no.
Yeah, and it totally
tugged another event for the audience.
Tugged on some really cool like geek bones at various points. Like at the very end, when all the ships show up, and Lando's there with all these ships, and you see, oh, there's the Ghost, and there's Wedge, and there's Snap Wexley, and you're like, oh, that's really cool that they brought these characters in these ships. You're like, yeah, this is rad. You're closing out the entire series, or the Skywalker part of the series. You're like, okay, really cool. I'm glad you did that. But it didn't really mean anything after that. It was like, you brought them here to show them, but they didn't really play a part other than to say, oh, look, Wedge is on screen. Cool. I mean, I just rad. But we didn't get to see Hera. Okay, fine. I get why you wouldn't bring certain characters into that because you can't develop them. But I don't know. It felt like that was the right thing to do, but it was almost the wrong way to do it. I don't know. It felt like they almost pushed that, like, we need the help, we're not going to get the help, oh god, we're not going to get the help, oh, now we're going to get the help. Like, they went a little too far into the you're gonna struggle before you get something. Like, I think that so. To a character,
and it almost didn't feel very earned when they finally did get the help.
Oh man, that's the word, earned. That's it right there.
The payoffs that they were trying to give the audience just were not earned. Like, the characters didn't learn very much. Finn lessened as a character as this trilogy went on. I mean, he became almost a non-character by the end of Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, I totally agree. And actually, the thing that almost ruined Poe for me at the very end of the movie is when him and Zori Bliss, like in the very last scene, they're on that planet, everyone's kind of talking, and he looks over at Zori, and he kind of gives her a look like, hey, like this sort of schwarmy sort of look like, you want to go? And she's like, no. And he's like, all right, fair. I'm like, so you just made him a misogynist? I'm like, why did you do that? Like, that did not, you didn't set anything up in the beginning other than someone said, did you have a history? Yes. That's all we got. Like, he's not Han Solo and she's not Leia. We don't know all these things already. Yeah. Like, why did you do that? That made him look swarmy and kind of at the very end of the movie. Like, what are you doing?
It feels like they wanted us to view him as like the new Han Solo, but without any of the character building to actually make him that. They just wanted us to be like, oh, okay, well, this is the Han Solo they gave us for this trilogy, I guess. But they didn't really do anything with it.
Yeah, and kind of missing the point, which is you don't need to replace Han Solo. Like, we don't need to have another Han Solo for stories to continue. Like, we can let go of Luke and Leia and Han and let their characters go away, and their character elements, the various components that make them up. The smuggler, the tank, the wizard, whatever, these fantasy components. We can put those various components into different characters in pieces. So Rey can be an amalgamation of 3 or 4 characters. Same thing with one of Ryan's favorite characters. Finn can be an amalgamation of a couple different characters, and it works. You can see the elements of those character archetypes in that other new character, but they don't need to be the same as someone else because that's what makes them a good new character to use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also think too, like, this is one of those things too where, J.J. Abrams is really good at setting the table, but clearing it off, not as much. And
I agree.
really great at casting, like amazing. This guy's got like a knack for casting television shows and movies. He's really good at finding good talent. And I mean, The Force Awakens, like excellent casting. Like
Hmm.
I just can't say it enough. Like that is just it's just great. But it's one of these things too where I feel like sometimes and this happens even too in like television shows, like the probably the most famous is the X-Files, where it's like a creator can't separate themselves enough from their creation to be able to make the right choices, and then it's like they don't know where to go. And like I feel like in The Force Awakens there was always a story that Ben Solo was going to redeem himself, so we're going to have that in episode 9. And it's
Hmm.
like that's why they feel like they kind of shoehorned in Palpatine, and then had the terrible line of "You're a Palpatine." That's like telling someone you're a Voldemort. It just doesn't work well.
Yeah.
But then to I think that was all done in the service of, well, I don't want Ben Solo to be a bad guy. And it's like, no, that's actually okay. He can be your big bad guy. He can be doing terrible things. And his redemption arc might just be in there is no redemption arc for him, and he just needs to be brought to justice. And that happens sometimes. That's an okay story to tell. And that it's maybe Rey that has to go through the trials of how is she going to handle that problem, very similarly to like how Aang. I know that we've talked about Avatar: The Last Airbender in like previous
Love
episodes
that.
too.
Love Last Airbender.
Yeah, like in the last season, the big thing that Aang's having to deal with is how is he going to deal with the Fire Lord? How and I feel like what they wanted to do was make Ben Solo or Kylo Ren a Zuko type character, and we're going to have the heel turn into a hero. No, he's past that point. It's over now.
Hmm.
He's the Fire Lord, and the story can actually be more like Rey wrestling with what do I do about that, like Rey having a problem with that. And that's also a great mirror to like what Luke has to deal with. Luke telling Obi-Wan, like, I can't kill my own father.
Hmm.
Rey feeling like she, how will she deal with that? I think it's because J.J. Abrams just didn't know, just kind of liked his characters from Force Awakens and couldn't realize that they had changed in the intervening years.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah.
didn't pay a lot of respect to the changes that they had already gone through in The Last Jedi, which I liked some of them. When they tried to
Mm-hmm.
establish that Rey was a nobody.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
still thought
mm-hmm.
that was interesting because it still had it had connections, it had parallels. Like Anakin was essentially a nobody.
Yes.
It still built meaningful connections to me that could have worked in a finale because, in a sense, thematically, it could have been like, oh, Rey had some more similarities to Anakin than Ben ever he could, even though he wanted to, and it could have had some really cool themes. But instead, like you're saying, Ryan, it JJ, it seems like he was just like, well, I started this in Force Awakens, so I'm just going to keep going with that, and we're just going to shove The Last Jedi off
Yep.
to the side and pretend that none of those developments happen.
Yep.
She could have been a really good bridge to a whole new arc of storytelling post Skywalker era where
Hmm.
she kind of agrees with like the Jedi in the classic sense need to go away. The final Sith, Ben needs to go because he's objectively the bad guy. He's gone, and now the whole idea of like a gray Jedi can be realized, but not gray. Like we've talked about this before, Ryan, where it's like
Oh
the
yeah.
idea of balance isn't balance between light and dark. Light and dark are polar opposites. The balance exists only on the light side. Trying to maintain a balance between, being purely selfless and being pragmatic enough to help people, not because the dark side is just pure selfishness. Doesn't help anybody, nothing else. So we don't want that. But there's still a grayness that exists on the sort of like the light side of things. And she could have been really interesting to say in the future, like the Jedi shouldn't exist in the way that they have existed for 20,000 years. This shouldn't be Jedi. It should be something different that basically teaches people to be whole and while leveraging the Force to do the right things and make good, smart decisions about how they're approaching it, which is very parallel to what we want to do in real life, or we hope people can try to learn to do in real life. And I think most people would probably connect with it like, wow, that's not the ending I was hoping for. I was hoping the Space Wizard would win and everybody happy and, it'd be fun. But that's not reality. That's not how things really play out for most people. And I think most of us could hear that and go, oh, wow, okay, that's kind of an ending to an era, the Jedi, but that means something else is going to happen. Well, what's that going to turn into? And that would have made for like a really interesting. Well, what's that going to be next? As opposed to for all of us like ending the movie going, huh? She's a Skywalker. She said her name, and she's on Tatooine.
That's
great, but fantastic.
But
But I mean, sorry for anybody watching this who didn't know, but spoilers. But you've
ruined. Yeah, it's over now.
Should I just go? I'm sorry. Should I just mute my mic? I apologize.
I always feel funny, like we're always talking about like spoiler alerts for a series that is at times 30 years old, 40 years old. No, it is kind of funny. But again, to your point, Jeff, I also think too, it's like if they're not going to be the Jedi anymore, which I feel like The Last Jedi is actually making a great case for. I kind of thought they were going to go full board and be like Rise of Skywalker. Why not call them Skywalkers? That's actually kind of a cool name. That she has this that she's this new look on how to deal with the Force, and it's the Skywalkers. It's based on Luke's vision. I think there was an opportunity that was missed there. So I agree with you there.
Since you say that, Ryan, that could actually be a really. I mean, anyone who hasn't read the more recent Thrawn book series, Brendan, I know you have. But I was thinking this could be that could have been a really interesting way to say, keeping the term Skywalkers around, but the Skywalker as people, they're gone. But from Thrawn, what we've learned in Timothy Zahn's series is they actually navigating hyperspace in wild space or the unknown regions is next to impossible with hyperspace or hyperdrive engines, whatever they're called. And words are escaping me tonight for some reason. But they can't really navigate. So there's these people that various civilizations can hire that can kind of basically use the Force to see where they're going, but the Chiss have their own, and they call them Skywalkers, but they don't tell anybody outside of their culture, and most people in the culture have no idea they even exist, and that's how they navigate hyperspace. This person sits there lost in like a Force trance, and actually is the person that navigates them through hyperspace, so they miss all the big objects in space. And so like actually he meets Grand Admiral Thrawn meets Anakin at one point in one of the books. You learn about this, and when he does, and he hears Anakin's last name, he's like Skywalker, and gets all thoughtful. And Anakin's like, "What do you mean?" Yeah. Oh, nothing. And then it just moves on, and you're like,
"I loved that moment in that book. Yeah, I loved that."
Yeah, and that could have been like the idea of that. It didn't even have to be super explored, but you could have left the opportunity open to make that another thing where the term Skywalker could continue to be used in a different storytelling way. That would have been like, "Oh, wait." Is there a connection here? Maybe there's not. Why was he named Skywalker? Oh, like never even needs to be explored. But the fact that she ended the way they did it holds too much onto what's been going on for the last 30 years. And not that I don't want to let go of those things, but there is a time and place in the story to let go of that. You've got to put something to bed and walk away from it. And usually at the place where like you're not ready to, that's the time to let go. And I feel like Rise of Skywalker just didn't do that.
Someone said, "Let the past go. You got to kill it." I'm telling you,
I loved that line. I thought that was such a good line in that movie, and I was like, "Yes, it's such a huge theme, especially in the prequel trilogy, but even 4, 5, and 6. I mean, it's a huge theme that just maybe the Jedi didn't have something right. You know, they could have safely gone that route, and nobody would have been upset. I think." Even in Star Wars, before any of this existed or was established, it's not like Obi-Wan was doing awesome. I mean, it's not like he was this powerful, successful Jedi that we see in his prime. It's apparent from the first moment that we even hear the word Jedi. Obviously, they failed and they didn't have something figured out. And so just to kind of bring it back and be like, "Oh, I'm Rey Skywalker. I'm going to start a new Jedi Order, probably." It's like, it's kind of the wrong message to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like this was an opportunity for it to be like a new page, but I also get it. Like I feel like there's so much now that we see that is kind of like something that we've seen before, because I know that that's a risk. It's a really big risk for something to be, totally different, or, to subvert expectations, or to be at times like very original. That's why, so much of what we've seen, it feels like, oh, it's nostalgia really like, drives those numbers. But I felt like I completely agree, Brandon. I feel like that was like a moment there that they had where it's like the page is blank. you can now write the rest of that story. And I think that if you look at the Force Awakens as almost a soft reboot of the entire original trilogy. I mean, there's the trench run. There's I mean, there's so many pieces of that where it's like it's a very soft reboot of the entire trilogy. And then you get the Last Jedi, which is this really different middle story that adds a tremendous amount of complexity. It was either you could run out and build something new and take a risk. You're going to take a lot of risks, or you could kind of go back to what you know. And I feel like they went back to what they knew, and they were like, oh no, it's the Jedi, and I'm all the Jedi and you're all the Sith, and this is a universe where people ask each other all the time about their last names suddenly. It was one of these things that was so not like, you could have really done something different, really gone and like been bold. But I get that. It's scary. It's scary to do something really big.
It's scary, but I even prefer a risk taken that I don't agree with than just no risks at all. I don't know if you've finished The Rising Storm yet, Jeff.
No, I haven't. I'm
not gonna spoil it,
like
but
almost
there's
halfway
so
through.
many risks in this book, and some of them I am just devastated by, and I'm so sad that those risks were taken. But at the same time, I'm so glad that they were. Just certain things happen, and I'm like, why?
Every picture I see on Twitter. There was a screenshot the other day from the Star Wars show, or not the Star Wars show, the like the weekly Star Wars video. They do this redhead gal from Lucasfilm. She does it like it's like 30 seconds or a minute long, and it's a meme. It's just a picture of her, and it's retweeting Cavan Scott, the author of Rising Storm. And it's at the bottom. It just says Cavan knows what he did. Cavan knows what he did, and I'm like, damn it, what did you do? And Cavan replied to me at one point, and he said nothing. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm like, don't tell me not to worry. I'm not worried.
I love when authors or directors or whoever they just go for it. Like there's something that I personally was hoping for from page 1 to page 427, and Cavan Scott, he looked at me and he said no. And it bummed me out, but at the same time, like, good for him. He was just like, I don't really care what people want. I care what this story wants and what these characters would logically do and where this would logically go, and didn't stop to think, oh, well, I'm not done with that, or I want to do it. It was just straight up, here's what would most likely happen among these characters in this universe based on how they were created. And I just wish like Rise of Skywalker just did that and just trusted the way the characters were originally created and let them develop more organically than like, I don't know. Force lightning, Chewie's dead. Ray Scott, like it's just so weird. Like,
when Chewie died, I was like, I think, oh wow, okay, cool. Like I'm not that I was like, I had a thing against
like,
Chewie or anything.
Chewie's dead, but
But I was like, wow, that's a bold step. That's I remember in the novels when they killed Chewie, and I was like, that's a bold step, and that was a big deal. And then they immediately erased it. And then I was sad for C-3PO because he had lost his memories. And then they undid that. And I was like, man,
I was going to bring that up next.
Make a commitment here.
Yeah, they wouldn't commit to anything.
No, you need to have that. They needed to have those tragedies. There needed to be more tragic points that were just finale. Like this happened. And C-3PO having the red arm, like it's silly, and they explained it in some comic books why he had the red arm. I went and looked it up, and like cool, but they never went into it, and it was just kind of there. And then he loses memories as the example, and it was like nothing here is tragic. I don't feel, I'm not feeling the ways that you would expect. You would feel like, oh my god, I can't believe that. Oh, and then when the good thing happens, you're like, wow, it's almost like the good thing didn't quite overshadow the bad thing. It was just enough to make it not so bad anymore. But you walk away going, well, okay, wow, they got through that. I'm really glad that happened. As opposed to, oh, yeah, well, the bad thing went away and they did a good thing. Cool.
Yeah, that's how I'm always left feeling with things like that too. It's like if you just keep taking away the choices that you make and you can't commit to anything, suddenly like nothing matters.
Yeah.
Yep. It's Game of Thrones season 8.
Exactly.
People surviving all the time.
We don't like, but
yeah, it's something that started out like amazing, and then I was like, ooh, these things are only happening because the script says to do them.
Winter is coming, and then winter lasts for 8.5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
It's like
Yeah.
and I was like
They're like,
into
I thought it
that
was going to be
lore
cold.
too.
That's it? No.
No, and it's funny because I feel like with so much of this, it's always like there's such a worry about like how our audience is going to accept this and how our critics going to accept this, and it's like I just keep thinking of three of my favorite like all time movies, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Vertigo, and Empire Strikes Back, to get onto the theme of some of our favorites.
There we go.
And all of those were like lambasted, like just torn apart, especially Vertigo. Like Vertigo was like a disaster. Like it almost broke Alfred Hitchcock's career, and like almost ended, like he had to like go into TV after that for a while. And it's such like it's one of these things where it's like critical reevaluation. Like Empire Strikes Back, like people hated it because it was like, oh, it's dark and these movies should be fun, and why is this movie so dark? And now it's like, oh, it's a jewel. Like now it's considered like a critically like probably one of the best movies ever made, among them, and like what is it? It's in the top 15 of the AFI list. If looking at those things, and so yeah, it's one of these things where you got to take risks sometimes, but sometimes they pay off in really big ways. Sometimes they don't. Not every risk works out, but man, like it's one of the age really gives you time to reflect on those things. Like I don't think I'll ever go back and really sit down and rewatch Rise of Skywalker and be like, oh wow, like this really is great. But I'll always go back and watch something like Empire and be like, oh gosh, like this scene is so perfect. The dialogue is so great. I don't doubt that this puppet, the puppet that this guy is talking to in a swamp that's probably George Lucas's backyard. Like I bought into all that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, I think it's just because they take risks and they made choices. But yeah, it'd be great to. I know that we've spent a lot of time talking about the opposite of our favorites, but Brandon, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on what your favorite Star Wars movie is.
Okay, so I kind of have two, but we can lean towards one or the other, and I'm fine with either. But it seems, Ryan, like you really like Empire and Last Jedi, which I also love those. My favorites are probably tied between Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith, but Empire is also there, kind of. I think you mentioned this right when we started out, but I think some of my memories tied to those two movies are part of the reasons why I enjoy them so much. Like Revenge of the Sith, I remember I was a kid, and somehow my dad got this sketchy pirated VHS of Revenge of the Sith, like before it was out on VHS. So I got to rewatch it before it was really out. And just something about that memory just stands out to me so hard. But I just love that movie to death, even though there's some cheesy parts and cheesy dialogue once in a while, but just that's like an example. It's like the opposite of Rise of Skywalker, where like, I feel like they fit so much into that movie, but stuff that mattered. They fit so much, and it feels like such a huge adventure. Like that movie feels twice as long as it is to me. And I kind of like Return of the Jedi for the same reasons almost. I mean, you start out the super awesome tense scenes like Jabba's palace, then you get the awesome stuff with the Rancor, but then you're right on to Jabba's sail barge and the Boba Fett fight and the Sarlacc. It's like all of this awesome stuff back to back, but instead of it being like hyperspace jumps, they're like logical progressions of the plot. And I love how both of those movies do that. So I think that's why I like those two the best.
Yeah, we've talked about this particular movie, Revenge of the Sith, and I have kind of a slightly different opinion about like where it is my favorite ranking. I will say though, now that you bring it up, something I really love about the movie compared to like the intro of Rise of Skywalker, not to beat that horse too badly tonight, is at the very beginning of the movie when Obi-Wan and Anakin are flying in space, and they're kind of flying. You just see the front ends, and they're flying over the Republic Star Cruiser. And as they're flying over it, you don't really hear much music. There's not really a lot of sound effects happening. They're just kind of flying. It's kind of that negative sound, like we talked about before, Ryan, where it's like the lack of sound effects or the lack of music is really impactful, because the moment they finally like information crest over and you see, holy crap, there is a shit storm happening below them.
Yes.
Instantly for me, I was like, oh my God, what were the Clone Wars like? And at the time, the Clone Wars, neither of the Clone Wars series were out yet. So you had no way to know other than in books, like what was the Clone Wars actually like. But you see that and you're like, oh my God, like instantly you're like, these guys went through some hell. They have been through some stuff recently.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel like immediately anything that's going to happen with Anakin, the dark circles under his eyes right off the bat, the longer hair, looking a little more shaggy, like almost immediately, just emotionally, those things click. Like they just like, okay,
Yeah.
I kind of feel, I got the feels of why he looks the way he does. I might not have been explained yet, but just that one moment for me at least was like, okay, I know, I kind of have an idea of how we got here, or that we
tells a
that we
wild
got
story
here for
without
some reason.
actually saying anything.
Exactly. Yes. It's
Yeah.
where like music and sound effects also play such a huge part in a scene, because that one moment set just a complete tone of emotion for me instantly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And just kind of knowing where the story was heading anyways, I love tragic characters, and I love characters who kind of have a fall from grace in some way, and just what better character than Anakin Skywalker. But yeah, like I love storytelling like that, where you learn so much about the setting and the world without them having to like somehow Palpatine return, like where I know what's going on without it being like, I'm, as an audience member, like we're not dumb. We don't need things to be just slapped in the face to know what's happening. Visual storytelling is so important. And the world building in that movie was so good to me. Like there are just so many huge set pieces where you really saw what was happening in the universe or the galaxy. Which I feel like, I don't want to beat it too much, but like Rise of Skywalker, the world felt, the universe is all these little worlds. It felt so small. Somehow this is a whole galaxy, but it felt small. And I think Revenge of the Sith made things feel very big, and you saw all these remnants of the Clone Wars. And I totally agree with you, Jeff.
Yeah, even the I hadn't thought about it like this before. The idea of it feeling kind of small, even the travel to Exegol. Like once they were able, like we see Ben go to Exegol. He's on this hunt for it in the beginning, and he just kind of gets there. He's got the Sith Wayfinder, but he just sort of gets there. And even though there's a whole like journey to find these, whatever, like just call it a damn holocron. It's just a Sith holocron. Just call it a holocron.
It's a holocron.
It pissed me off. They show it. It's a triangle glowing red. It's a freaking Sith holocron. Why didn't you
sell it at Disneyland and call it a holocron?
I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Hold on. No. We're gonna do this. I'm like, it was literally a Sith holocron. That's what the damn Wayfinder was. I'm like, okay, sorry. Let me just. Anyway, so they do this whole journey. This whole journey trying to find one of these to get them to Exegol. I'm like, it's in wild space. Like, it's supposed to be, or the unknown region someplace. It's supposed to be someplace that is obnoxiously difficult to get to. Yeah. Yet, once they find this, they're like, cool, we're just there. And there's no challenge. They didn't even use the lessons from the actual Kessel run in the Solo movie when they had to go through some hell trying to, now we know why the 12 parsecs, if you round down, is like why that, like we know that stuff is really difficult to do now. When you watch Solo.
I loved that they showed that difficulty of that journey,
and they could have used that concept of like this is a pain to do and made that more of a challenge, and maybe lost some ships along the way, or some people died along the way trying to even get there because it was so hard. They could have done that, but they just like, we found a box, and look, now we're at a secret planet in the middle of wild space that was hard to get to. It's like,
we got the secret box. Next scene.
I'm telling you, they had like Wayfinder in the script, and someone like had a big circle around it, was like, find a better word for this. And then they were like shooting, and they were like, "Oh no, we forgot to find a better word for it. It's fine, just go.
It'll be fine.
We have to get this shot done today. Let's make the day." I see Rich is on. Hey, Rich, I haven't talked about Star Trek yet, so I'll get to it. But the thing that I think you're both bringing up though too about episode 3, which I love, is I love the visual storytelling. Like, I love the sound design. Like, one of the things that I really enjoy is the heartbeat at the start of the episode 3. And it's the same heartbeat that you hear at the end. And it's like a really great like bookend. Yeah, it's because it's a story. And also you're getting the baptism scene from like Godfather, or the revenge scene from Elizabeth. All of that is happening at the end. Like, all of these terrible yet wondrous things are happening Vader is being born, Luke and Leia are being born. All of these things are all kind of coming together at the same time. And it's funny because I agree with you, Brandon. I know that Jeff, you've talked about this too. Like the dialogue is definitely cheesy, but it's like, hey, like I'm willing to buy it because there's another thing that happens, which is I kind of buy all these characters in their roles in that moment. Like, Episode 2 does this thing that I hate that Episode 3 fixes, which is, and it's there's that moment in Star Wars, in the original Star Wars, when Obi-Wan kind of leans back and he says, I was a Jedi Knight the same as your father. He was a cunning warrior and a good friend, and he kind of like looks off, and you're like, wow, like the Anakin was his really close friend, and you never see that until Episode 3, and they're like piloting, and Anakin's like, I'm not gonna leave you, and they have banter. It's light. Even when they go and land the ship, and it's like another happy landing. That these are all the things that I love about Star Wars that are like,
me too.
that it really does make it more about the characters, even though there are some amazing action set pieces. It really is great. It's a great way to like make these characters close, and not just close because the script says, Padme, this is where you tell Anakin you love him now. But instead it's so much more that they're trying to get into that movie, and it doesn't feel rushed. I really do believe when Obi-Wan feels like, I don't want to do this. Or when Obi-Wan visits Padme and says, you're the baby's Anakin's, right? I mean, like that line, and even
Tells
with the
so much
music that's
without
playing,
saying it.
Oh my! Well, it's that line, and then right after that, Ewan did such a great job of going like I'm so sorry, or something like that. But the way he said it was like he wasn't making eye contact with her. He was like looking away, like I can't. Wow, that just sucks, and he kind of walks off, and you're like, because she's feeling it, and he's feeling it, and you're all like. Yeah, it's just they did that. Those moments did such a good job of conveying.
Even when there's a little cheesy moments, it's just like the weight behind what they're saying still, and just kind of like what Ryan said. Just I buy it that these characters, like it says a lot. And the little moments with when they land the ship and Obi-Wan and Anakin's little quips. It's like I want to know more about those stories. Thankfully, kind of just what Joseph just commented, but like we got the Clone Wars, so we got those stories.
Yeah,
but we had before those existed. We got these little moments where I was like, shoot, like I want to see that. Like I want to see Obi-Wan and Anakin hanging out during the Clone Wars. And like in Attack of the Clones, I agree. It was just kind of like Anakin's this angsty teenager who sort of doesn't want to listen to his master. But then Revenge of the Sith totally fixed it for me.
Oh yeah, like it's so funny too, because you're being told like, oh, they're such great friends, and they're almost immediately jerks to one another, and it's like, are you guys good friends? Because you guys don't seem to be. I
mean, it's more accurate to say that they're brothers, like, and they even recognize, like, it's more accurate to describe them as actual brothers at that point, because exactly the way they act, the way they banter, the way they kind of get frustrated with each other, and how their styles are and all that. Like, you guys are more like siblings than you are like friends, which is actually kind of nice. It's good to see them because it allows. Because friends want to still have that positive relationship with each other, but siblings don't feel like you have to be obligated all the time, which is kind of nice because it allows the two characters to not have to feel like they always have to be friendly to each other. They can be upset or pissed or frustrated or whatever. That's good. Like, it creates character development. It's nice.
Yeah.
No, and Joseph, that's a great. Sorry to interrupt you. Right, Joseph, that's a really good comment. I took a screenshot so I can remember that. We'll definitely use that in a future show because we have a lot to talk about with the Clone Wars.
I could so much just gush about the Clone Wars. I love that show.
Exactly. So you guys both got me thinking about like what would be my favorite as we're kind of winding down for the night, and I wanted to go with like Empire or something, but honestly, sorry, Rich just chimed in.
You are correct, Rich. It is odd, isn't it, that we're never in the same room together? If you want to see another show that I'm on, I happen to be hosting a small show called The Ready Room. So yeah, just you might catch me over on the other side. When I'm not here, I'm sometimes piloting the Enterprise D. So I'm
Brandon, we've had just the running joke is we've had a number of Star Trek references that have been brought by Ryan for analogs in this series, and Rich has always been joined us, and he calls us out every single time. So we now have a plethora of Star Trek included in the show.
I love that. I love that.
Just for you, Rich.
Always mixing up my wars and Trek. Always doing them
exactly. So I actually am going to go with The Force Awakens. I was going to pick one of the non-trilogy movies, but here's why I keep coming back to The Force Awakens. It's an easy movie to watch for me over and over again. I get to see these characters I haven't seen in a long time. I love that, when Han first jumps on the Falcon and he steps in, gun pointed out, like classic stance of Han Solo pointing the gun out, and I'm like, like it tugs those sort of heartstrings. But for me, I say it's more existential than that. The reason I love that movie is I can specifically remember, Ryan, I was still working at this company. I was in sales, different org, and for a team building exercise, this is when The Force Awakens first came out. I had just been at the company for a little while. We're doing team building, say, let's go see this at the theater as a team. And I go there, and like 90% of the people I'm with are not Star Wars geeks. They don't care. They're like, oh, it's a movie, we'll watch it. And I'm like on the edge of my seat. What is happening? What is happening? And people are leaning over, Jeff, who is that? Oh, it's this person, this person. They're like, how do you know all this? I'm like, shh, just quiet. I'm watching the movie. But I realized in that moment that people came, and when we all left and we had some beers afterwards, all of them were like, oh, wow, that was a really good movie. Like, I haven't seen Star Wars since I was a little kid, but that was fun to watch. Like, they weren't like thinking about, oh, I want to see the next movie. They were just like, oh, I was really entertained. I'll take my kids back to watch it. They'll really like it. And me as a geek, I'm like, oh, I get to see these new characters and new stories, but some old characters and winding things down and continuations of where we were at before. And it felt like it was a really clean and simple, and I say that in the best possible way, like method of bringing people who love Star Wars back into Star Wars in a film version again, in the bigger continuity, and also for bringing people who have never been a part of this mythology into this new era of like, and now you get to learn some new stuff that you've never seen before, and you never would have known to even think about it. Because even though you see Han on screen and Chewie and all these characters that sort of come back into it, that movie never makes you have to know who they are to understand what's happening in the movie. Like, even with Han and Leia reconnecting, and you hear them talk about that, you don't have to sit back and go, wait, what's going on with Han and Leia? Do I need to know all these things? It would have been interesting, but it's not enough that makes you have to go, well, crap, do I have to go back and watch all these movies for this to make sense? The stories just progress, and then it fills in those blanks like you said earlier, Brandon, it makes you have to work for it emotionally to get there, and then they give you enough to satisfy you, but not entirely, and makes you like, oh, wait, but what else am I missing? That's exactly what you want people to feel. And for me, it was an amazing way to not just restart, but bring in a whole new generation of people who have never been exposed to this type of sci-fi, this version of sci-fi and mythology in one thing, and storytelling. And I loved it for that reason. It kind of gives me some warm fuzzies every time I think about it, because like, you see force powers we've never seen, like Poe shooting at Kylo Ren and him sticking his hand out and just stopping a blaster bolt in midair and freezing Poe at the exact same time. Like, we've never seen that in footage before. Like, maybe we've read about it, we've never seen that before.
One of my favorite moments in a movie theater.
Oh my god!
Scene.
And Poe's looking at his face like, wait, what just?
Yeah.
How did this just happen? Like, yeah, all that stuff just made me feel like this is such a great way to get us back into this story again.
Yeah, I can't compare anything to that feeling I had when, like, on opening night of The Force Awakens, it was like, oh my god, it's back! Like, Star Wars is back. It was, yeah.
I remember. When I was a kid, they had re-released the original trilogy, and I went and seen that. When the prequels came out, I think I went and saw like episode 1 like 3 or 4 times, because I was like, I got to make sure that I'm wrong on this. Like, I think this could be a bad movie. I saw the rest of the prequel trilogy, but I as far as a theater experience, I completely agree with you both. Like, The Force Awakens was one of the greatest theater experiences I can remember. When, and I think a lot of that is because there's a lot of time. They let a lot of things land in that movie, like the sequence where Rey is introduced and there is no dialogue, and you're just with her character for like a while before, and even get home. She makes that funky bread, and then she sits outside, and the next time that she talks is to like whatever that character Tito, where the BB-8 is inside of the net. and that's like a 10-minute sequence outside of the 1/2 portion. That is a whole sequence where there's no dialogue. You're just getting to live with that character, and then you care about that character. You care about Finn in the exact same way. As far as like dueling protagonists, I just remember caring so much about both Finn and Rey, and really wanting to see like, oh gosh, are they gonna make it out? And even like like quippy parts of episode 3, quippy parts of episode 7, where it's like, we're gonna use the Force. That's not how the Force works. These were great lines, and more than that, I just believed all those characters, and I wanted to spend more time with them. And so yeah, like as far as the theater experience goes, I think that The Force Awakens might be like one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Star Wars theater experience.
Yeah, you guys have convinced me to probably watch that movie tonight now. But yeah, I totally agree. That movie has a lot of heart, and it's just it. I saw a tweet the other day that said that movie has the best character introductions in Star Wars, and I might agree with it. It's just every character, like the first time you meet them, it feels organic, and it feels like just part of this, almost like part of a story that's been happening before we started watching it. Sort of like Episode 4. Just all these pieces are moving already, and then it's like we jump in and we see Rey already living her life. We see Kylo Ren already on the hunt for Lor San Tekka. It's like all these pieces are moving that it's enough to move the story forward from where we started, but enough to where we also kind of want to know what's happening before, and we get those little quips, and it does have a lot of really great elements. And I've rewatched that movie a lot of times, actually, more than the other sequels.
Yeah, I know I've used this reference before. Sorry, Ryan, I'm gonna bring it up again, but I've used this reference before about Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, and in the drawing of 3, in the second book, when Roland gets out to the beach and there's these 3 doors on the beach after his palaver, and he just wakes up after like 100 years sleep, and he's on this beach. When he opens the door, he's looking at somebody else's life. So what you said, Brandon, like we just kind of like we're dropped into the middle of stories that are already in process, and then when the movie's over, we're like we kind of stay in it. But when we get to when we get to Last Jedi, we're still continuing that. I think the separation between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker was nice because in that gap, like we're pulled out of the story for a while and then drop back in, and they did that really well. But for me, The Force Awakens, the character development piece is great in that, because if you just dropped in a camera, like a candid cam next to someone's life for a bit and they didn't know it was there, what you see with Rey is exactly what you would see. Like they're just doing what they do every single day. We don't need you to tell us more than that. We can just see it. When Poe jumps in and he's straight to meeting Lor San Tekka and there's already something happening, you're like, wait, what's happening? Why is this happening? Are we going to learn what's going on? And they did it in a way that made you feel like, but I want to be here. Like, I'm not frustrated by this. I'm actually excited because they're going to tell me something interesting about what I'm trying to learn here. And I love that, because it makes you feel like when you walk away from those characters for a little bit, that door just closes and we're going to step into another door, but we're just going to pick into it, not in the beginning of their story, but midway at some middle point
I
in their
just
story.
love stories that do that.
Yeah.
I used to, when I was teaching creative writing, I used to tell my students, show me, don't tell me. Like, show me this world, and show me a world that's already alive. And I love that. I just read Frank Herbert's Dune, just the first Dune, and I'd never read it before. And I got that same feeling. Like I jumped into this book and there's so much happening, and it was kind of confusing, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, there's like so much about this world to learn about and just dive into. And it's so exciting. Like Force Awakens does the same thing. And even weirdly, Phantom Menace does it a little bit, even though that movie is very flawed, but it does it a little bit. And it has a lot of big set pieces that are really interesting, and a lot of things that are already going on when we jump in. And I like that about that movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel the same way. And by the way, like I totally share the sentiment about episode 1. Like I think actually episode 1 could do a little bit more telling in certain areas and a little bit more showing in others, where it's like, like honestly, like we could stand a little bit more of the tell for like some of the things that are going on with the Jedi, and some of the things that like we just like jump right into 2 guys show up at a space station, take out lightsabers, and just start wailing on
Yeah,
robots.
I would have liked a
By the
little
way,
bit explanation there.
exactly. Like, just
Yeah.
let's sit with them for a little while. Like, honestly, it would have been great to some of the things that happen between Anakin and Obi-Wan, or as Rich points out, Jean-Luc Picard and Q. You can actually have two characters spend a little bit of time together and talk, and it actually, I think, would have went like episode 1 opens with Obi-Wan saying something like, I got a bad feeling about this, which is like, okay, great, we got it. Someone put it, mark it off on the board. I got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah.
And it goes right into Qui-Gon. Then I'm going to teach you, Obi-Wan. But what it would have been better would have been let's sit with that moment. Let's talk about how Obi-Wan might be a little bit of a hothead, and let's see a little bit of that action. And instead, we're jumping in and out of that room, and TC-14's got to bring this stuff, and now there's gas, and don't worry, we're just going to start like slicing up robots.
That interaction in that scene between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, when Qui-Gon's like, Obi-Wan, keep your thoughts in the here and the now. Obi-Wan just goes, oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Like, don't do that.
I would have liked that to be expanded more, for sure.
Push back, Master. Yeah. But I think Obi-Wan, no, but Master, like a father-son relationship, a kid, we all, little kid, like, is going to keep prodding you a little bit until you're like, hey, gear down, big shifter. Just change the mindset just a little tiny bit. Like, you're right, Brent, if we had just seen that a little bit more, or even not even have them be escorted in a ship to, the Nemoidians, have them start like in the Jedi Council or someplace else where people are talking, and the two of them walk up and say, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, you've been summoned because we need you to go do this thing. Oh, okay. And they get a ship together, and they go, and they have some banter about that gets them corrected before they land, and then the thing happens. Like something like that built up their relationship a little bit more, not just, we're here. Hi.
Yeah, I think that would have been awesome. I think it was like a couple months ago, I hadn't watched Phantom Menace in forever, and I was like, I'm just going to watch Phantom Menace. I bet it's not as bad as I remember it. And I've watched it like 5 times since then, and now I actually like it. But I remember thinking when I started the movie, I was like, did I skip like 10 minutes? I forgot that it was such an abrupt introduction. But I do think if they would have like just given us a little bit more of their interaction, I think Qui-Gon's death at the end would have been way heavier. And I think the payoff of who Obi-Wan becomes in episodes 2 and 3 would have also been a cooler payoff. Just like seeing really what he started out as. Because you're right. We just kind of, he's like, oh, all right, Master. All right, okay, whatever.
It's
that's kind of happens a lot.
Yeah. They don't give him any time, and it's too bad because it's like episode 1, and Brandon, I would love to hear your thoughts on episode 1 because of the fact that in our last episode we actually talked all about how I feel like I could make a good case that episode 1 is possibly the best film of the prequel trilogy. Like, it's shot like amazingly well. Yeah, it is like a really like it's like the way that a movie should look and work. It's really it's a really great this is gonna sound like old timey word. It's a great picture, but it is a really like cool looking movie, and it really does do the things that I think George Lucas wanted to do. But and especially like visual narrative, like. You really get, you see, Queen Amidala alone. You feel the weight of all these things on her. And it's not like she's sitting there in the scene where she's looking out the window and she's saying, man, I feel alone. No, you really get that sense in this giant room that she's in, that there's all of this weight that's on her. I completely agree with you. I think that, it actually is one of those movies, the more you watch it, you can see it. It just is, it's missing some of those like telling moments that I think would actually it's one of those movies that maybe shows too much in some places, and just doesn't tell enough in others.
There needs to be a good balance of both. And but the showing aspects it has, some of them are great. Like I say the word world building over and over and over, but it's like I love it when I can watch a movie or read a book and I just can really visualize what this living world would be like, and like I can just place myself and my imagination in it so much better if the author or the director just takes the time to really paint that picture for us, and that it does such a good job. And like when I was a little kid watching that movie, like the scene underwater, even though
Oh my
like
gosh.
Jar Jar's being annoying in the ship and all the grown-ups didn't like it, but I was like, cool, they're underwater and there's a giant fish and there's like this whole city under here. And then the pod racing I thought it was awesome when I was a kid. Like all I wanted to do is be on Tatooine and be in a pod, like they did a lot of really cool things that made just the galaxy of Star Wars feels so much bigger than it felt like in the original trilogy.
And you didn't even need to leave one planet to get it necessarily. I mean, they went to 2 planets essentially, but they never go to Coruscant. They don't go to these other places until the second movie. And you still feel like, to your point, that you're in this bigger place. You only had to visit one of the
things happening other than just what the main characters are doing, and that's so cool.
I think that's for me one of my favorite parts of some of the other movies, the non-trilogy movies, is you get to see what those other characters are doing. The other parts of the galaxy where stories are happening, things are happening to people that aren't these main stories. Because in the real world, there's other shit happening everywhere. Like, it's not just the story that we're reading in the headline. There's things that are happening to everybody else, and it creates such a good corollary between what you see on film and like, oh, but I wonder what else is happening to that villager over here that got messed up by the thing that happened. Like what happened? Why did that have to happen that way? So like when you watch The Mandalorian or watch others, then you get to see those stories. You're like, oh my God, yeah, these feel more rich, and they, even though they are not happening at the same time as the movies, you watch like Mando or whatever, you get to feel like this is what's happening while all those other people are dealing with the big ticket stuff. This is what everyone else has got to deal with at the same time, which kind of makes you feel you're slogging through the mud a little bit, which you need. I think you really need that in
I don't mind
stories.
it at all. I don't think necessarily that a scene or an episode absolutely has to advance the plot to be valuable. Like if it just makes the world feel richer, if it just makes some element of what we're seeing feel more real, then I'm all for it. Like I know some people complained about, is in The Mandalorian, I can't remember which episode it was, but the when he crashes the Razor Crest and is the spider.
Oh, yes.
I can't remember what episode it was, but
I don't remember the
episode. That episode was great. It felt like a miniature horror movie, and I was like, "Oh, this planet is so interesting. Let's get more stuff here."
Yeah, and if you had been if you were a fan of Rebels and had watched Rebels, you're like, "Oh my God, it's the creatures from Rebels on that one planet they go to," which is a whole connection that you get to make. Like that was all of that. Yeah, I'm with you. It was like, oh my God,
I couldn't have cared less that there wasn't. I didn't learn more about Grogu that episode. I was just like, "What a cool set piece! Like this is so cool just to see." And I think Phantom Menace does that a lot. I even think Attack of the Clones does that at times in a really good way, and at times really bad. But
no, I agree, especially on Attack of the Clones, because it's like you can, it's that sequence where they go to Camino. All the Camino stuff, I'm like, yeah, I'm here. Like, this is awesome. This is great. I like the look of this. I feel like that's such a Star Wars moment. And I feel like it has since been replicated in a lot of other things after that. Like, I always think Star Wars' staying power is if it creates something that then like produces a lot of imitators to the point where it's almost like derivative. And the prequel trilogy does that.
Absolutely.
You can really see how it's influenced movies that come after it. But really like the point about that second season episode where they're kind of like trapped on that ice planet, and I think though that all comes down to like characters. Sometimes it's not a tremendous amount of dialogue. My favorite episode of season 1 in The Mandalorian is the prisoner episode, where it's like that set is like super small, but oh my gosh, it's all character driven. All of those characters are great. And so many quotable lines. I'm all business now. I learned from the best. Those are great. Those are great lines.
Well, I know we want to keep talking about this forever. The show went a little bit long tonight, which is great because we've got an awesome guest, Brandon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm having so much fun. I could talk for hours and hours. So, dude, really, thank you guys. That's
what we both say every single time we do this show. It's like we could literally just stay here all night and just keep talking. I think one of these nights. I
struggle with trying to jump to the next topic because, like, I'll talk about the Phantom Menace for 6 hours. I don't care.
I feel like we need to do one of these like as a special episode where we don't have a topic and we're just doing happy hour and we have some social lubricant and we're just shooting the breeze with the people who are joining because we're just going to wax poetic on whatever comes to mind. Well, Brandon,
give me the time. I'll be there.
Absolutely. We would love to have you back on the show. Absolutely. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get a hold of you, what you do?
So yeah, I am on Instagram mostly at brandon.aka.jarjar. I'm also on Twitter at, what is it? Oh, it's at Jar Jar Fett LV, because somebody took Jar Jar Fett, so I can't use that. And those are the two socials I use probably the most. I'm primarily on Instagram though right now, and I'm just reading a ton of books and writing reviews, and I'm just like this online. So if anybody wants to
Yeah, and I
follow
found
me
it.
and talk about some nerd stuff, please do, because I
That's how
love
we
it.
connected initially. Like I saw your
Yeah,
posts specifically on the Thrawn Ascendancy, the new Ascendancy trilogy. I
yeah.
saw your post, and not just the post, but like how you built the imagery for that, and then the way you did your review of the story was really amazing. Like I
Thank you
read it,
so
I'm like,
much.
dude, this is really cool. I had thought like sometime in the past, like, oh, maybe I should do book reviews because I'm getting all the High Republic. Then I saw yours. I'm like, no, I don't need to do that. You're already doing it, and you're doing an amazing job. Like I don't need to step
You
into
are
that.
too nice, man. Thank you. It was it was my wife who like kind of talked me into doing it, because I've always wanted to do like freelance writing, and she's like, you should just try it, like just write a book review. And I'm having so much fun doing it. So like I'm just gonna keep trying to improve and get better and better and see where that takes me.
Totally. Yeah, keep telling
Right
the
on.
story. Keep telling those stories. Keep reviewing them. You're doing really good stuff, dude. It's been awesome to have
Thank
you
you.
on the show. Um, so as we're up, Ryan, do you have anything before I jump into the giveaway?
No, no, no. Just as per usual, thank you to everybody who comes and participates in our show. Whether you're watching it, whether you're participating in the chat, it's really great always to see regulars. I know I already called out Rich. I always like to see Rich. And I know we didn't do any Star Trek heavy references tonight, but next episode we're gonna talk about our favorite Star Trek movie. And we're going to be talking about First Contact. We're going to be talking about Wrath of Khan. We'll be getting digging in. But in all seriousness, I just really appreciate everybody who tunes in every single week. We love making this show, and we're so glad to be able to share it with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we
Yeah.
wrap up tonight, we've got a new giveaway. We did a giveaway recently of one of the Thrawn books. Everyone watching is lucky that I accidentally ordered a second book when I pre-ordered them 5-6 months ago or whatever it was. So I've got an extra copy of The Rising Storm. This is the one right here. I haven't even opened it up once yet to put a bookmark or anything in it. So we've got this. We'll be throwing up some notes on our various social things here soon about how you can win this. But tune in. I think what we'll do is we'll announce it next week. So tune in next week to the show, and we'll have details on how you can enter to win. But brand new book. It hasn't been touched, or it's been touched by me, but it hasn't been opened up, hasn't been read, no pages have been flipped. So we've got that coming up here soon. Thanks everyone so much for being on the show. A bunch of friends of mine from live streaming channels everywhere have been joining, including Rich and Robert and Matt and a bunch of other folks too. So thank you all so much. We love just being here talking about this. The fact that other people want to join us and be a part of this conversation too is kind of legit. So
It's
thank you
awesome.
all.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you so much. This has been like one of my favorite episodes for us to shoot. It's been like so cool hearing
That makes
your
me so
opinions on
happy to
this
hear.
stuff. I'm really hoping that you have some time to come back and join us, because it would be great to kind of dig in, especially on that Clone Wars. I love that idea of like, let's
I love
dig
that
into
idea
the Clone
too.
Wars. That sounds
I saw
awesome.
that comment and I had an answer in my head immediately. So like,
Right on.
I will be
Well,
back anytime you guys would like. Seriously, this has
dude.
been awesome.
Right
Right
on.
on. We'll get it set up. Everybody, thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your evening and Friday, and we will see everyone really soon.
Right on. Hey, thanks everybody.
Oh, still there. There we go.